and I'll scrub through the timeline. You can see these are actually ring waves that I've modified. I subdivided them along there. They're sort of their, what would it be, radius, I suppose. And this allowed me to model them a little bit more and animate them a little bit more. And you can see that what basically happens is they kind of spray outwards in this crown shape that I described earlier. And you can see each one is different. So what I wanted to have 3 different animations for these. And you can see they use slightly different timing, and they finish on slightly different frames, but they all basically come to a rest on frame 15. They've all basically done their sort of splash animation by that frame. So these are used as the splashes that we see in our final scene. So if I just close up this group again, if we have a look at the materials, we can see we have a bunch of materials here. We've got this material is actually on the ogre statue. And the only thing really remarkable about this is probably that I've actually got an animated, if you look at the bump map and we scrub through the time, you can see that the Y offset on the UVs are actually animated. And that basically makes, if we scale this up a bit, probably not quite as large as we've got it here. Let's try and make it a bit smaller. There we go. If I scrub, I do it 1 frame at a time, you'll see that the actual material is animated here. And that was done just to try and give the effect that water was running down, the surface of the ogre. It's just, just a cheap and cheerful kind of effect there to just try and give that sort of water running down the surface. We have the same thing for the pedestal, same kind of animation going on there basically. Then we've got our raindrop material. You can see it's got a really, really bright specular level, and it's not very glossy. Which isn't necessarily that realistic, and that again, that's trying to give us this overbright effect. Because of the motion blur on the particles, we're losing that highlight big time. So I really, really pushed it forward a lot. If we used a renderer such as Brazil or maybe not Mental Ray, but maybe V-Ray, then those overbright highlights would probably be preserved, and we wouldn't have to use this kind of hack that we're using here. Then we've got the material for the splash. This took quite a lot of development, mainly to just try and get the opacity right, the additive levels right. In each case I'm using gradient ramps, which is mapped onto this object here. So if I put it on shaded view, you can see we've got this gradient going on here. For the specular level, I've got another gradient, which you can see here. So you can see it's basically more specular towards the middle of the splash. The opacity, I've got this map here for the opacity of the splash. And then we've got various other maps, all basically trying to balance the amount of opacity and the amount of specularity on the splashes to try and get just the right kind of effect that we wanted. Then we got this material for the wet floor, and then we got splash version 2. This was just used as a debugging material, working on our scene, just to make our splashes more obvious in the scene. So that's basically it for the materials, and that's it pretty much for the objects. Let's very quickly show our helpers in the scene. There aren't any, so there's not much to look at there. For space warps, if I hide geometry, you'll see that we've got a collision object for the ground. That's pretty easy to understand. We've got a collision object here for the pedestal. We've got 2 collision objects for the ogre. We've got one called high res and one called low res. And if we have a look at what the objects are picked, we've got ogre statue low res and ogre statue. And basically I left this in there because if you wanted to, you could actually swap out and use the high res render time resolution ogre to actually do the collision detection. But in the end I decided not to do that, as I said, because it was pretty slow. We have gravity, obviously to pull our rain down and our raindrops down. And then we have a drag, and that's obviously to slow things down a bit, take out some of the energy. And we also have a wind force in here. So if I scrub through, you can see I've got a sort of random animation going on in it, just to make the rain blow around a little bit. And you can see we've got some turbulence here as well, just to give a nice sort of turbulent motion to things, which we've used in a lot of the effects in this DVD. So I'll just go back to the camera view. Let's show our space warps again. Turn off geometry. Let's show particle systems, otherwise we're not going to see anything when we turn on our particles. And let's now have a look at the particle flow. As I said in the previous chapter, this is pretty much the biggest particle flow you're going to see on this DVD. We're finishing off with this example.